You're listening to The Adventuring Party, talking about gaming the Irish way. Cade Mila Vulture, you son of a gun.
Welcome to the party. I'm Warlord Scar.
I'm Owen.
And I'm Dave. And we're wondering, where do you get your material from?
There's an awful lot of thought transcribed into scrawled beer mats running around the gamosphere. And some of it is really useful, really inspiring, really thing. And you can run an entire campaign off it. Others is less... Folks, have you ever had a game where you're running a module, or maybe you're helping out a convention? You've been handed a hastily scrawled together scenario from someone that you've never heard of before, and you're just wondering, and you're looking at the structure of it and all this, the elements of it, and you're just thinking, maybe I should just throw this all in the bin and start from scratch.
Some modules, yeah, or some consonars are pretty poorly laid out.
Yeah, they. It's not even that they're necessarily bad or the material in them is bad, but layout can be often the very first killer. This is like, I think an example I can use right now is there's great award-winning, all-time favorite module for early D&D called The Dark Tower by Janelle Jacquet. And it is one of the most imaginative adventure modules I've ever seen. There's multiple dungeon levels, all interconnected with various teleporters, traps, traps that are actually shortcuts, and extra sub-levels going between all of them. It's this wonderful, interconnected, intricate toy of a dungeon that a party can have a real fun of. But the information layout is absolutely bizarre, because you'll get you see level 1 room 11 or something. Yeah, you'll go and you see there's a little weird little hatch or dotted line on one corner of the thing. It says, that's weird. It doesn't say anything about it in the notes. And then you go down to level 3 and say, and you get to room 327. It says, obviously this has the hatch that comes from room 111 and dumps the exploring party into the nest full of ghouls. And it's like, wait, what? Wait, those are connected? Shouldn't both sides of this information channel have mentioned this?
You think so?
I mean, and maybe the main problem is that there's all these callbacks as you go through the text. Like you go 3 pages on, and it'll call back something, 10 pages previous, and you say, "Oh, that's cool," but how do I track how everything's interconnected? You can put down a dungeon map, and sure, that'll give you a list of rooms, but it doesn't necessarily say what is relevant to what other things. If how many of these teleporters lead back to level 1, how many of the wandering monsters on this random table are actually boss monsters from another from a previous level who've gone for a walkabout in the middle of this dungeon invasion.
You're talking a little bit about organizational stuff and how it mind maps for the writer, and it mightn't match to how you would organize the information.
Yeah.
So basically, you're looking at, they've done a multi-level dungeon, and so they've gone room by room explaining what stuff is. And they might even mention this links to room E15 from room B7.
Yeah.
But they haven't. But is that how your brain works, Warlord? Or is it that's not
all
how my
the
brain
time?
works?
Yeah. It's because it doesn't take that many instances of this happening for me to become very uncertain of, it takes away my ability to just make up a detail. Like, and
Yeah.
in many situations, if you're just going on to let's say a more underwritten bullet pointy dungeon, like some of those
Yeah.
minimalist OSR one-page pamphlets, those sort of come with this agreement from the writer that they trust you to make up details that they haven't mentioned. Like they've mentioned like 2 or 3 bullet points of important details, and then they trust that you, if your players ask you, well, what does this room smell like, or you know, are there any ashes on the floor or something like that, they trust you to be able to come up with those details. But in a situation where you information is in, there's a huge amount of dense information in the module, but it's not organized the way you would think of it.
Yeah.
Then that takes away your ability to empathize, because you're thinking, well, I could make up an answer here, but what if it's contradicted 3 dungeon levels later?
I can, from knowing you, Warlord, I know that would drive you crazy.
Yes.
You would go mad at that one. Now, that's not everybody's problem, but some people are like, oh, I said that there's no smell here, but it should stink of the Otiogs who are down the corridor in the thing.
Yeah.
Boo.
I will.
But there's a word count limit, of course, right? Because you can't account for everything, you know? You could mention maybe the stink of the Otiogs drifts up in the Odiog section, and you might remember, like, because it is important to remember sights and smells when people enter rooms, but it's kind of a tricky one, isn't it? Because it's how you present it for one person might be how somebody else's mental map of something doesn't work, and they're like, I am bamboozled by this adventure, you know.
It's like,
Yeah, I mean, I think the best that you could do is try and organize it in a way that's consistent and well, as clear as can sensibly done in the space constraints. Well, again, my mental map is showing through there, though.
yeah.
Now, this when you're talking about Dark Tower, I was actually looking at that recently because Dungeon Crawl Classics Goodman Games did a 3-volume slipcase of it for DCC and 5th Ed D&D, and I was thinking I would never run this under 5th Ed because resource attrition, because it was designed for a different game. It was designed for a game where resource attrition was a thing, and in 5th Ed, it's not so much a thing.
Yeah.
Like, if you tell people in 5th Ed, oh, you guys aren't getting any long rests or any short rests while you're down here, there'll be issues, you know? They will not be used to such hardship, number one, and some people's classes will stop working. You know?
Yeah, I mean, the game itself is not designed to survive, like, a lack of short and long rests.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you can see why someone might still be tempted just because it's got this unique style. Like, even though, I can get really annoyed at the information layout, sometimes it is still a really cool dungeon that, is still almost unique in its interconnectedness. So, but
I was considering getting this, Scar. Have you gotten it?
I have an old version that was reprinted like 5 years ago. So it's not adapted, but so it's basically like a photocopy of the original in a new cover for me. So that works because I have a modern OSR system to adapt the stats and all that stuff too. So that's not a problem. But like, assumptions can be very different because what counts as very trying for the parties back in AD&D can be very feast or famine, where either the dragon sneaks up behind them with his invisibility spell and breathes on them and they all get turned to ashes, or they spot him with their they get some lucky rolls, spot him, and then just gank him before he can lift a claw.
Good work.
I mean, that's one of the interesting things where you're looking at an adventure that has been written, but it's been written for one system, and it doesn't necessarily, even if it was a great adventure in AD&D, it doesn't necessarily convert over to 5th ed, because that makes a bunch of different assumptions about how people level, how people get access to spells, how people, handle a kind of an attritional system. And can you just leave whenever you want? Can you just come back whenever you want? Does something reset if you do that? Do things change? And that's one of the things about some of these old ones, where they're kind of flashing back. If I was looking at an old AD&D module, a dungeon crawler, I wouldn't run under 5th ed, because I don't think 5th ed handles dungeon crawlers terribly well.
No.
I would go back and I would run either an older version of D&D, or and I would think pre 3.0 is what I'd pick, because too many of the corners of the game were sanded off for 3.0 in some ways. Wands of Cure Light Wounds were a little too much of a easily obtainable resource to just
they
keep
were
you
staple.
going. Yeah,
staple 3.x
but this is what the retro clones I think are for.
Yeah,
You pull out DCC and be like, "Yep, this can handle this."
yeah. DCC, World's Light Number, Shadow Dark. These are what it's designed for. But the module was written, actually probably close to 45 years ago, because it was one of the first things out for AD&D First Edition. So, Projanel at the time did not anticipate that people would be running multiple other editions of the game. So, by default, the task of updating it and assuming that and checking to see whether the assumptions of the module still fit, those are up to the reader, not the writer.
Well, yes. It's just it's being printed. It's unless there's a new edition coming out, the expectation should absolutely be on the reader. But just thinking about adaptation, the Warhammer 40k RPGs, the D100 systems that Fantasy Flight Games were publishing, and originally kicked off by Black Industries.
I was actually talking about this week.
Oh, they're sort of compatible. Mostly compatible. The stat lines generally work out with some.
All of the Black Industries / FFG family of D100 RPGs, from Dark Heresy to Rogue Trader to Death Watch to Only War to Black Crusade, Dark Heresy 2nd Edition, are all not identically compatible, but roughly compatible.
Yeah.
They each featured some degree of rules drift or change as people fixed what were thought to be issues, or changed things because the designer had a bee in their bonnet about something related to it. But I remember when it first came out, Dark Heresy 1st Edition came out, and they actually demoed it in March over in Leprechaun in, I want to say, 2008. And Mike Mason was over demoing in Leprechaun, and people were playing and they were having a blast. And I pre-ordered the collector's edition, and a month later the collector's edition delivered, and kind of on the days it came out, Games Workshop announced they were shuttering Black Industries and FFG was taking over the running of it instead. Black Industries successfully produced one RPG out of Warhammer's Expanded Universe. Wolfrup 2nd Edition, they got Green Ronin to do, and they got a bunch of British writers in to write for it. But it was all done by Green Ronin and then basically printed under Black Industries. Black Industries effectively got a Wolfrup 2nd Edition out, which is a very productive edition, but it was really Green Ronin doing it. And then they did Dark Heresy, 3 or 4 splat books: the Inquisitor's Handbook, Purge the Week, the GM Screen, and that was kind of it. And then
the Dark Gods, maybe.
Yeah, it might have been Disciples of Dark God, but I remember getting it in April, and we were at Vaticon, another old Irish gaming convention, and we picked up our copy of Dark Heresy, and we went back to one of the guys' house, and we played Dark Heresy from 7 p.m. to 6 in the morning.
Wow.
And we were all in our late 20s at this stage.
Oh
So
my
it's like,
God.
we were meant to be too old for this kind of stuff. No, we just started out, we started having a blast, and we played it all the way through. And because that was the first time there'd been a 40k RPG, an actual 40k RPG. You're rich with options nowadays, but back in the day, it was not so. And I just remember that. And one of the advantages of that was the GM had a pre-written scenario to work from, which told them things about the tone of the game, told them things about, how often should combats happen, told them things about, how does the system handle all this. And we played through it. And we played through this. We created characters, played through the scenario, and then the GM went off and, for the guts of 4 or 5 years, ran a Dark Heresy game, partly running his own stuff and partly adapting content that already existed. So there was a value there of being able to take a script and use it to handhold you through the first game, which is often why I have a bee in my bonnet about the inclusion of a scenario in the starting book. Yes, it's arguably a waste of paper for some people. Yes, it could now just be a PDF. But on that first weekend, having it there was super fun. So that's my only argument for it.
And it's certainly that that ability to just let the writers of the game reveal to you how they imagine it to be run is very important. And yeah, like you read through a lot of notes, like you I think Gary Gygax, relatively smart guy, very eager, very good to decent a patriarch of the early hobby. But the man could not explain his assumptions.
No,
listeners, you can go back and you can listen to our breakdown of the TMG and just see like how much folk knowledge needs to be applied to something like the original DMG to just decode what it was meant to be, and that can similarly apply to the way he wrote his modules. Like there's one of the very first modules he wrote, was it Steading of the Hill Giant Chief. If you are not on Gygax's wavelength, what will happen is you will be told, you'll blindly follow his thing of, your PCs get arrested and told they have to assault this house full of hill giants. How they expect you to kill hill giants when your party able to be arrested by random knights in the count's court, unclear, but partly these high level chumps are very easy to bring along. But if you run it without realizing that the kind of wily gameplay that Gygax was encouraging through negative play, you will have the players walk into the main room and be assaulted by like 24 hill giants plus all their ogre chefs, and or they try sneaking in the back and get eaten by dire wolves. Because there's like a nest of like 24 dire wolves in the back garden.
Well, at least they were taken care of quickly then.
Yeah, but like there's a whole bunch of assumptions that Gygax says that people are going to be basically trying to cheat the scenario and absolutely do 100% of their maximum to not have it be a fair fight. And also the contrived background thing was very specifically photocopying what he'd written for, I think, one of their first Gen Cons. So it's not actually something you do for, if you're just running the thing in your own campaign. It's just, how to get these chuckleheads into a 3-hour session at a con. But again, very hard to get that meaning just from reading the scenario that is written. So, these are assumptions that some authors are better at communicating across in their notes than others. So, I mean, if we're talking about having to run something from someone else's pen, one of the most common ways gamers end up doing that, particularly at conventions, is running someone's con scenario. Have people been a puppet for others often?
Yes.
I almost was roped into one. Technically was, and then it didn't happen. So technically, no.
I've run many a scenario. There was an old joke that used to be played on me was they'd go to WarpCon and they'd get the worst scenario that they could find, and they'd have me run it.
What did you do to WarpCon?
No, so the playgroup, what they would do is it became a joke that I got a scenario. We went in one time and there was no spare tables. And I said, look, if you just give me the scenario, I'll run it for the guys. And I got given the scenario, and it was one of the worst things I'd ever run. I will mention no names to protect the guilty, but it was terrible. And what happened then was it became a tradition where they're like, oh, every WarpCon we should do this, get Owen to run the worst scenario there. So that's what happened with it. So it was often like, oh yeah, this one is truly terrible. There we go.
Yeah, it's a scenario. It's a situation that I've got myself in a couple of times of having to run. Although I find that the best way to insulate myself from having to run other people's scenarios is writing my own and inflicting it on others. So that's been my defense.
Writing, very good.
Although I will say one of the big things about this is if you're the type to do this and worry over much about what people think of your scenario as they're running it, you find that a lot of the writing time is just put into making the scenario readable by unknown people who'll be running it. And that's where I find that a lot of the scenario writing time is like you'll come up with the scenario and the layout and the main beats in one wild sugar crazed or caffeine addled afternoon, and you'll have that out, and after a bit of cleaning up, you'll have something that you can run fairly easily. But then you can easily take another week or another couple evenings to make it so that someone who's not you can run this. And infamously, an awful lot of scenario writers find that they do not get the time involved to do that translation work before the actual convention happens.
Yeah, I often find I worry whenever I write anything that I'm not doing it in such a way that it'll make sense to me, but it won't make sense to other people. And like I can't tell if it'll make sense to other people. I have to get somebody else to look at it.
Fair.
And that kind of what's the term? Danger reader. Just a test reader, I guess. And if you're depending on your things, you might worry that if I give it to a test reader, that's one more person who won't get to be surprised by my masterpiece when they actually play it at the convention because they'll have read it ahead of time. And I mean, if the convention's that small that everyone is going to it, I don't know. Seems like there might be a different problem. But yeah, it is I mean, deadlines and the ability to find feedback, take in feedback, and then apply the feedback. These are all things that apply to professional products as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Feedback
feedback
is gold.
is tough because you've got to have robust ego about it to not get disheartened, but you can't have too much of an ego that you can't take direction.
Hmm.
So you need the balance there. And additionally, you need to find someone who'll give you good feedback. All right. One of the things is people are really, really good at identifying what they don't like. And they're really, really bad at supplying solutions. So you should always listen. If someone says, I don't like this, you should listen. What you should never do is do what they say. Right? You basically go, okay, that's why you're doing that. Fine. You don't like that. Fine. I will change it. Oh, you changed to this. No, 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 no. I will change it. And I will figure out a way to do it myself because I understand the other tensions that are in the scenario and that the reason I put that thing there. So I will change this, but I will not consult you about what I will change it to you. I may just show it to you and go, there's what I've changed it to. But I don't basically make you a part of that process because you can identify you don't like it, but you can't really identify what is the problem. Because there are times when I've seen people identify an issue and they come up with a solution, and I'm like, they're completely correct about the issue, they're completely wrong about the solution.
Hmm.
And they will be confidently completely wrong about the solution.
Yeah.
There is an issue in RPGs anyway where there is a maniacal DIY enthusiast streak that runs through RPG writers and GMs and other
Yeah.
things that they think I can write as good a scenario as anybody and I can design a good as game as anybody. When in reality, no, you can't. Yeah, you might be able to. You might be a person who's a skilled writer or a skilled designer, but all the time you're not. And you have to. People don't recognize that, but they're not. They often go around, "I'll change this rule," without understanding why that rule is there. I wince at anybody who decides to make sweeping changes to a module or sweeping changes to a rule set without having played it once. You have to play it at least once before you can start making big edits. Because you don't understand why those things are there until you start running it and all the pieces come together for you. Sometimes you can. Some people can read critically, but there's very few.
Oh, yeah, from personal experience, it's well possible to to screw up a module, even having experienced the system before.
Yeah.
But yeah, the just rolling back to a previous example, I've had I have some fun adapting the various 40k RP modules to different games in the setting. Like Dark Heresy to Deathwatch was quite fun. I did make a point of making changes such as beefing up the opposition because apart from a handful of enemies, most of them would have perished in half a combat round, given even a moderately leveled Deathwatch party.
Yeah, adapting stuff for power level is a big one. I mean, depending on your mastery of a given system, it can be workable to see. I like the scenario, but it's too high level or it's too low level, so you can try upcycling or downcycling the foes. I mean, yeah, a lot of their material. It is entirely possible to tear it apart and adapt it in various ways, but you're not guaranteed any level of success. I think one of my most successful ones was there was a Pathfinder First Ed module. I think it's like it's starter mod. It's just like a starter scenario where you're like going into this steampunk dungeon, and like the idea is you kind of get locked in this sort of carousel of dungeon rooms. You basically have to turn the carousel and go into each room in turn. And I adapted that. Really, it was mainly just the floor plan and sort of an inspiration for what each room's contents. But I adapted that to a sort of sci-fi game that I was running at the time because I needed a floor plan or something to base it in because this was all a little bit improv. And I found that I was able to make relatively decent changes, but that was very specifically meant for a short excursion, sort of site-based investigation more than and like a low level, like it was like a level 2 party or something, and level 1 or 2 dungeon. I found I was able to make the adjustments to that, but that was more seeking the module as inspiration rather than as a thing in itself to run. And that's something you have to make a distinction of, depending on like what your objective for running material is. Because like as you say, there are some people who will look at this thing they've bought or downloaded offline and go, this is perfect except for all the things that I disagree with. So I will change this.
Yeah, good luck with
And
that.
yeah, it helps if you're going to do that kind of adaptation. It really helps to know, like, particularly if you're going to spend, big money on a fancy, kickstarted module or mega adventure or whatever have you. It really pays you to like, are you buying this for a couple of floor plans and a premise that you'd like to adapt to your own system? Are you buying a dungeon crawling adventure for your investigating party because of the back of a couple of any awards or what have you? Like why are you getting this material? Like if you're a poor sucker being asked to run a scenario at a convention, that's very different from someone who went on a Kickstarter binge 3 years ago and has suddenly had 200 euros worth of gold edged premium edition adventure show up on their doorstep they don't even remember buying, and it's like, well, now I have to run a campaign in this, otherwise, or I'll have wasted all that money. So I guess what we're saying is, material is imperfect, but that's not necessarily a deal breaker. But it does. The writer, we hope the writer has done their best to create the material that you want. But like at the end of the day, if your players are complaining, you can't call up the writer and complain. Well, depending on social media, some people can.
Oh, you'd be shocked. Sometimes you get contacted about stuff to give out. I've had players at the end of running a convention module occasionally ask for the adventure. And like it's just a printout to me, so yeah, sure, far away. But I know people, I think sometimes do have taken away. I took away an adventure from a convention once and I ran it then for my home group. So it does occasionally get used, and being able to contact the writer can occasionally be, hey, what's this bit here for? It didn't really work for me, or it didn't work for our table, and I've read it and I still don't get it, Because a lot of those ones were convention ones in Ireland. Like convention scenario in America will often be, or used to be certainly, a purpose-written module. And for some of them still are. Whereas in Ireland, it was all just a bit of, sure, crack together something there and we'll run it. And they were long on, kind of good feeling and thing, but maybe a bit short sometimes on structure or completeness. Many's the Thursday the adventure was finished,
Mm-hmm.
It is, because I remember we kind of came up with some guidelines for writing an adventure that would last 3 hours and get you through it.
Yeah, I believe we got some notes from industry veteran Gar Hanrahan about this.
Noted industry veteran Gar Hanrahan.
Award-winning, I believe.
And I would like to stress again, we are not making fun of Gar Hanrahan when we call him noted industry figure Gar Hanrahan. It's just a running joke. Gar's amazing. He's a great guy, very knowledgeable, doing very well for himself, working on Lord of the Rings at the moment. His One Ring stuff, I think, is really well regarded. I think the Moria stuff just came out and people were waxing lyrical about it. They were Like really, really, the Mario stuff is apparently excellent. I think it's for the One Ring. I think the Kickstarter came out recently.
I believe I've seen hard copies in the shops for both the One Ring 5e and the original version. There's 2 rule sets for.
Yeah, there's a 5th ed one, and there's a the One Ring one, and it was under both thing. But apparently fabulous. Like best take of Mario ever. So that's our wee plug for Gar. But I've genuinely seen that feedback. I've genuinely seen people say that. I haven't read it myself, but I've heard nothing but good stuff. Nothing but good stuff about it.
Yeah. So we're not trying to scare people off from buying modules or investing in forever books to live on the shelves and dream about running someday. That's an industry staple. We can't complain about that. But we do want to just acknowledge that there's difficulties with RPG material. Books do not come with a copy of the writer with them.
No.
So if you don't be afraid to try different ways of writing, like look into a couple of different styles and say, because maybe you want something very blinged out, very bit extensive with writer commentaries and a history of 30 years of people writing and finding all the pain points of scenarios. So you'd want something like Murder. Sorry, was it Murder on the Not Murder on the Orient Express? It's
Horror on the Orient Express.
Horror, yes.
Or The Enemy Within, the recent re-release by Kiko 7, which had commentaries on the previous editions for the first 3. There was quite a bit of, and then this is the reason we revised it.
Designer insights, nice to have.
Yeah. And they had it for basically Graham Davis was doing the who did it for the first 3 because he'd written parts of the Enemy Within previously. And he'd done kind of Rough Night and the Three Feathers. He'd done some stuff for Death in the Reich. He'd done some stuff for things. So he went back and he rewrote big sections. He wrote big sections and included commentary on it. And he included as well. I think he did the commentary on Power Behind the Throne, because Carl Sargent, of course, left the RPG industry and recently passed on, I believe. Left it in a pretty strange way.
Yeah, he just seemed to have disappeared off the face of the earth around 1995, and then I think he recently got a.
He was parapsychology. He was a parapsychology person, I believe, as well in universities. And I think someone once said what happened to him was he got in an accident and was badly injured and was kind of not, didn't want anything to do with the RPG industry anymore. Didn't want to do anything. Was doing his own thing. But I've heard these things said, and he was quite a big part of the early RPG and early early Wolfram, certainly, because they were originally Power Behind the Throne was an AD&D module, and it was adapted to that,
Yeah.
That is interesting.
Yeah, but I guess what I was trying to say is there are going to be people who really, really appreciate it, having that really built out scenario structure of big hardback, full of notes, full of explanations and justifications and such. And there's going to be people for whom that is way too much, and they'll just overload them, and they would get be better handled with say 10-page OSR adventure, or some scenario hooks in the back of the book, something that can set off their imagination and cause them to bridge the gap between the material provided and the game at the table. And it behooves a GM looking for material to try to figure out which they are. Thankfully, there's a relatively good amount of pre-made material for free that you can sort of. It's not hard to find, an OSR blogger with, a couple of scenarios, one-page RPGs. Actually, I think you can get most of those for free, or maybe only the last year's, and then the compilation is a couple of euro. If you have money to invest, looking around drive-through RPG for some cheap stuff might look up. But
bundle of holding.
Yeah, absolutely. A good bundle of holding will really give you a whole bunch of stuff. And yeah, I guess we're going to this is like RPG material of this kind, whether it's setting books or full scenarios or bullet points in the back of the book to give you ideas. These are all, unless you're in a very weird and negative relationship with your RPG writers, these are all intended to be helpful, but how they're helpful to you is going to depend on you, as it were. So don't be afraid to try things out and see the different approaches and see what. I think there's going to be some things that are going to be better for when you're reading it in your spare time, going, that's great. And there's going to be stuff that's better for when you're at the table and you're in a crisis mode, as the players are already picking up their dice and looking confidently at their character sheets, and you have to figure out a solution to the players. But yeah, I guess we're going one size fits all. And one side does not fit all. Sorry, and the scenario writers are trying, although some of them really maybe should not have volunteered to write 3 scenarios for the convention a month before it started.
No convention scenario has ever benefited from there being 2 other ones to be written by the same person.
Oh,
it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. At worst, at best, you get even. There is as good as there. They're usually worse. Everyone should be max 1 scenario.
Well, that's why I have multiple conventions in the year.
Absolutely.
All right. But yes, if you've been affected by the topics here today, if you have been handed a soaking beer mat with dungeon ? Scrawled on it in very large writing, and be told that's your scenario you have to run, you can tell us a tale of woe on our social media or on our Discord. But for now, this party's over.
Thank you for listening to The Adventuring Party. Join us on our Discord server, where we keep the party going after hours. Otherwise, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, Twitter, or you can email the hosts at party@theadventuringparty.net. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, Share-alike version 3 license. But you probably knew that already. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and look forward to seeing you back here next week. Goodbye.